Hello, and welcome to EZRA Asks, where each episode we invite in a special guest, a leading thinker, to help us grapple with an important question related to the world of modern work and professional development. In today's episode, we are asking the question, how do you effectively transform for tomorrow? We'll be diving into questions like, how do you balance performance for today while innovating for the future? How do you build belief in change when you're not sure you believe yourself? How do you set direction from the top whilst empowering others throughout the organization to drive change forward? And to help us answer this question, I am so delighted to be joined by our guest, Marc Howells. Welcome, Marc, to the show.
Thank you, Sinead. Very pleased to be here.
Great to have you with us. And Marc, just to introduce you before we dive into our topic today. So Marc is the VP of, I'll get this right, Global Talent, Learning and Organisational Development at AstraZeneca, which, as everybody will know, is a big multinational pharmaceutical and biotech company. Your career at AstraZeneca has spanned over about 20 years, if I got that right.
Correct.
Very international. We'll talk about that in a moment. Mixture of global and UK roles. And I know beyond that you have a background in business studies, HR, and organizational effectiveness. And in your spare time, I've been learning. So I know you are a diehard Liverpool fan and love rugby, following the Lions on tour, gardening. You are Welsh.
I am.
Fluent Welsh. Anything you'd like to say in Welsh this morning?
Edrych ymlaen i'r episode heno.
Tell us, what does that mean?
Looking forward to tonight's episode.
Oh, excellent. So Marc, welcome to the show. And tell me, first of all, what's brought you here to tackle this question? Why is this question interesting for you?
It's a great question because I think it's so pertinent to what we're doing at AstraZeneca. Our company is based on innovation and the pursuit of science for the benefit of patients. And we find ourselves in a world where technology is moving so rapidly, the world is changing so quickly that we are constantly looking out 5 years and beyond in thinking about how we're building for that future. So for us, it's really about how do we prepare our leaders for a future that we don't know what it looks like, for challenges we haven't yet encountered, and for building resilience within the organization to be able to navigate both the opportunities and the challenges that we're going to face over that period of time. So how do we stay agile in the face of that?
And this is exactly why we wanted to have you here on the show, because I think AstraZeneca is doing such incredible work, as you said, navigating an uncertain future, building organizational resilience, leadership, and I'm sure lots of great lessons learned along the way that you can share with us today. But before we get into all of that, so much to unpack. So as you might know, Marc, at EZRA, we believe in the superpower of coaching, and that actually coaching itself helps individuals unlock their own superpowers. So I ask you today, what would you say is your superpower?
I think certainly a strength. I don't know if it's a superpower, but it's, I think one of my strengths would be making connections between different topics and themes and bringing people together that can help innovate around it, bring different thinkers and different perspectives. So the diversity of thinking to connect the dots and see what is the possibility that we can make happen in that space.
That is certainly a superpower that not many people have. So fantastic. And hopefully you can help us do just that today. Connect lots of dots and make lots of great connections. But I want to just warm us up. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Marc, and you have no idea what these questions are that I'm about to ask you. So I hope you're not too scared. I've got a few would you rather questions so I can just get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
Would you rather binge a new TV series or read a good book?
Binge a new TV series.
I think that's the honest answer for many of us. Would you rather be an early riser or a night owl?
I'm more of an early riser, but I do occasionally like being a night owl.
Night owl. Would you rather never cook again or never clean again?
Never clean again.
Never clean again. Same as me. Um, would you rather take a big risky chance or have a small guaranteed win?
Big risky chance.
Big risky chance. Yep. I thought you might say that. And finally, given the time of year that we're in, would you rather, after this podcast, have a hot apple cider or a pumpkin spiced latte?
If it's 5 o'clock somewhere, I'd go with the spiced cider. I think the mulled cider sounds pretty nice, I must admit, on this nice autumn day.
Absolutely. You're a man after my own heart. Fantastic. Okay, so let's move on into our big topic here for today. And I think you've already sort of really nicely set the scene for us, Mark, talking about AstraZeneca. And I want to hear more about that journey. But before we do, I just would love to hear more about your personal journey through AstraZeneca. 20 years is an incredible career. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what have been the big highlights for you, some lessons learned along the way, and what's brought you to the role that you're in today.
Absolutely. When I first joined AstraZeneca, I came from the home retail group that owns Argos stores. I knew nothing about pharmaceuticals. I had actually never heard of AstraZeneca. So I actually had to look them up when I was contacted about the role. And what I found was this incredible organization with a real deep-seated purpose and passion in terms of what they do, and a really strong set of values. And I joined initially working, supporting manufacturing facility in Macclesfield in the UK, learned a bit about the business, and then from there moved into global business partnering roles, supporting some global functions and change. And having come from retail, where change is a constant, AstraZeneca was going into a period where change was starting to increase on a more frequent basis. And therefore, it gave me an opportunity to use some of the skills and experience I had from retail. But I just found that the caliber of people that I met, the values of the organization really connected with me. And it's the kind of place that kind of gets under your skin. You feel a real sense of belonging with it. Before you know it, the years tick by, and I went from global business partnering into a center of excellence role as a talent director, supporting operations and R&D, learned more about the business, about the bigger enterprise picture, and also about the R&D. And that really triggered even more of an interest and a passion for the business. And then I had a really interesting opportunity working with one of the executives who gave me an opportunity a little bit out of the blue. We were running a talent conversation and doing some strategic workforce planning. And he pulled me aside and said to me that there was a vacancy for a role as a site general manager running a manufacturing facility in Australia that he needed to fill. And he gave me some feedback about strengths he thought that I had, and some areas of gaps in my experience that he felt that needed to be filled around large line management, etc. And then he offered me the role. And to begin with, I didn't quite understand what he was offering me, because I'd not made the leap from the role I was in to moving to Australia. And I had the weekend. He gave me the weekend to think about it and told me he wanted an answer by 9 a.m. on Monday. I talked to my wife. We thought about the idea. We spoke to a lot of different people. And on Monday, I nervously went back and accepted. And
so out of the blue, you had no idea?
No idea.
And then over a weekend, you made the decision to move family to Australia.
Change location, change career path.
Yeah.
I went out to Australia just after Christmas and embarked on what was one of the best personal and professional development experiences of my career. And I had 2.5 years of running a facility that had $1 billion of supply, supplied to 27 different countries. We supplied nearly 98% of local anesthetics for Australia. But it was an incredible experience from a leadership perspective in how I could use my HR experience to engage on culture, build connection, develop the leaders. But I also had to go up a very steep learning curve in learning the business and understanding how to manage risk, how to find out who has the right information to help you make decisions. And yeah, it was an incredible experience. And we did a turnaround of the facility, grew it, and in the end, ended up investing 120 million in capital investment and grew the capacity of the facility. That then gave me an opportunity to build on that, and I moved to China. So I ran supply and manufacturing in China, and I looked after distribution for Asia Pacific. And again, running a even bigger facility in China. At the time, it was close to 1,000 people, and there were only 2 expats, myself and a Swedish head of quality. So leading an organization in a language where you need an interpreter for everything was also an interesting experience. But again, you build on the experiences you've gained, working in a different culture, fascinating experience. And then from there, I moved into head up all commercial supply for the company, and did some changes and supported some integration work with some M&A that we did. And then from there, I've gone back into HR, and I've headed up HR for all our corporate enabling functions and global operations, and spent 2 years in the US looking after our US commercial HR organization. And then for the last 6 years, I've been running this Centre of Excellence in Talent, Learning and OD.
I love the journey that you've been on, Mark, and what I can clearly see, and knowing you a little bit now, that sort of learning mindset that you seem to bring to everything, and each experience you're taking something from it, and that's helping to build towards the next experience. And obviously then you were in the business and know the business really well, and then to come back into that talent role that you're in today, it must just give you such, I suppose, credibility in the business, and just such rich kind of exposure as to what it's like working in lots of different places. But obviously during you've been there 20 years. AstraZeneca's had its own, and sort of not, some of it quite public as well, has had its own kind of journey and ups and downs. And maybe you can take us back a little bit, because I remember when you and I spoke recently, you were saying, we were at a certain point, things were not great. And then we set some really bold ambitions and goals. And we've had this kind of incredible transformation, but probably not everybody's is as aware of that. Maybe you can just give us a little bit of that.
The energy that's been and the momentum that's been built as we set our sights on 2030, what you feel is that even though it's a very aspirational goal and a very high bar, there's such a passion and a sense of, yes, we can do this. Yes, it's a big ask, but we've got incredible people. We've got amazing leaders. We've got a great culture, and we've got a purpose that is really tangible. And it's something that, somebody described to me not long ago. They'd not long joined the organization from another very well-known purpose-led company. And they said the purpose in this organization walks the corridors like a giant that you just can't get away from. And it really connects with you. And it fuels people along.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, so eloquently described, Mark. I think that incredible actually turnaround story. Every time I hear you describe it, I'm just quite inspired. But there's a few things I'd love to pick up on in particular that you said there, because I think it'll be interesting for people around. Well, I think first of all, you kind of double down on the role of leaders, and at the top, like setting that incredibly clear strategic vision that probably felt very ambitious and out of reach. And we know that, so many, there's that classic stat of, 70% of transformations fail because of a lack of leadership alignment. And it appears that this was something that AstraZeneca did really well. But how do you think you were able to align so clearly leaders at the top behind that vision? Because I'm sure there were cynics, looking at this thinking, this is madness. We'll never do this.
Yeah, I think, I'm sure that we absolutely had cynics. And I think not cynicism in the sense of disbelief, but cynicism in the sense of this is an incredible challenge and how will we achieve it? And I think he comes back to building a sense of belief. But what we focused on initially was we started to talk about how do you win from within? So how do you know yourself as a leader? How do you understand your strengths? How do you elevate those strengths to their optimum? And how do you also recognize where you also have different archetypes and styles of working that sometimes could have a negative factor? So by understanding those better and investing in that understanding, you then learn to adapt your style in different situations in order to have a more positive impact. But the other piece that we talk about is it's also about the resilience of leaders. Yeah, AstraZeneca is an incredible company. For such a large organization, it moves with pace. It's very performance orientated. It's very data orientated. And that requires a level of resilience and energy management from our leaders. But that's something we've also invested in helping our leaders develop and build. And when you couple that skill and that capability, and we build that muscle in the leaders, when you add that to the values that we have as an organization and then the purpose, the three factors coming together become an unstoppable force. And it's always incredible to look at how far we've traveled. And we're also, the company's constantly disrupting itself by either new acquisitions, expanding the offering into new areas of therapy, thinking about how we can continually evolve the offering to patients. But how do we also avoid stagnating or complacency creeping into the organization? So it builds that level of entrepreneurialism in the organization and a mindset and a belief that says there's always more that we can go after.
And on this point, I think this is really interesting, this idea of kind of a bold and visionary leadership where, it's a sort of a confident uncertainty, almost like we're setting this out. We're not quite sure how we're going to get there. Could you just tell me a little bit more about, how it's so hard to cultivate that boldness because it's not without risk, right? Like you could get it wrong. How do you encourage that mindset in your leaders to, I suppose, take those risks and set bold visions and knowing that they can't have oversight over everything to be effective?
I think it comes down to how do you make smart risks? And I think this comes back to, there is a need for an attention to detail.
Yeah.
So if you have deep subject matter expertise, but also are taking a broad perspective of the opportunity, you start to make smart, informed risks that are data-led. And, we operate in a highly compliant environment. So we have to make informed risks, but it is about maintaining that entrepreneurial muscle in the organization. It is about fail fast, learn fast. It's about experimentation as a culture and a way of working within the organization. And once you've cultivated that experimentation, which is part of the DNA of scientists in our ways of working, is that then becomes a mode of introducing new innovation in whatever guise, experimenting with it, making course corrections, adjustments, and then scale it rapidly. And that's the opportunity that we have. And it's to do it in a thoughtful way, but with intention and with scale and purpose in the way you execute it.
And I suppose in order to do that, you have to create the conditions where, psychological safety, a space where you feel free enough to take some smart risks and not, worry too much about repercussions. Obviously, we're not talking about preventable failures, but, to be able to, you must have that kind of environment that makes it possible.
You do.
Yeah.
But it comes back to the piece about how do you also take personal accountability for the decisions that you're making? How do you have the resilience and the mental fortitude to step into the unknown? In the world that we're working in, you'll never have all the answers. So how do you ensure you have enough of the data points to give you confidence based on experience and insights to take a leap into the unknown and make a smart risk before pausing, reevaluating, and then taking the next step? And I think it's about building that ability to disrupt, not just internally, but how do we disrupt in the ecosystems we work in? How do you leverage an ability to start small and scale a pace and agility in the way that you move forward? But then as you want to broaden that into something that can impact a wider organization, is that enterprise leadership to take people with you. So you're not innovating in a dark corner and you don't tell anybody about it, is share the idea if it has value and a broader application.
And one of the things that just triggered a thought for me, a number of clients that we're working with in pharma and life sciences, I think are saying similar things to you, which is about, we need to move fast. We have to strip away some of the more traditional bureaucracy, away from some of the sort of decision-making consensus, the silos. That all sounds great in theory, but how do you practically? I think I've heard you say before, you have stripped away some of those more traditional structures. I'd love to just hear maybe a few examples of how you've enabled that speed and more decentralized decision making.
Yeah, I'd say as an organization, we're very decentralized because we need our P&L business leaders to be able to have the agility to be entrepreneurial, to be responsive to market needs, to connect with patients and customers in the way that we're working. But it's also about striking a balance of where you see a theme or a trend appearing that means there is broader application, is how do you simplify it, how do you standardize it, and how do you repeat it at scale so you're driving efficiency out of the delivery. And it's striking the balance between where do you need to be unique and innovative and tailored in your solution because it drives value, where do you need to standardize, simplify, and accelerate when it can drive even greater value at that level. And I think that's where we try and use functions like global business services, where we standardize our ways of working, we're using technology at scale, and it's the repeatability and the efficiency. And I think digital is just going to open up such an opportunity for us in that way.
And when you're, we're talking about transforming an organization at a leadership level where you can't possibly be involved. I appreciate what you're saying about staying close to the detail, but realistically, we can't be involved in the day-to-day, and you're trying to communicate big visions. How do you, at a teams level, really enable that, do you think? We talked before about teams of teams. I wonder if you could just expand on that.
I think the piece with that is it's about providing the clarity of the vision, helping people connect with the why.
Yeah.
The why for the organization in the we, and then the why for me as an individual and as a leader in supporting that objective. And if we then provide clarity around the parameters, what are the expectations around the deliverables? What does the outcome need to look like? Where are the risks that we need to manage? I think then it's about empowering your people to go after that objective in the knowledge that how we're going to do it and the connections that we need will deliver the right results and staying connected to it. And it's also about looking left and right and making sure that you're not operating in a vacuum, but that you're collaborating in a way that is courageous, that it's not about consensus. It's okay to have healthy tensions in an organization. If you're trying to be innovative, if you're trying to move at pace, having those tensions is healthy because it brings the diversity ideas and perspectives out. But it is also ensuring that it doesn't become destructive or counterproductive. And then it's about moving forward and taking people with you.
And I think, especially in your world, speed is often of the essence, right? So companies that can adapt quickly, they're going to get that significant competitive advantage. But it can also lead to risks and missteps, etc. how do you, how do you really feel like you can drive that change at pace? Because I hear you're saying, we had the vision for 2025 and now we've got a vision for 2030 without just change fatigue kicking in, because that's a lot, constant change, bigger ambitions at pace. How do you build that kind of resilience in the organization?
I think it comes back to, and I think this is a huge advantage for AstraZeneca and other organizations that work in a similar field, but I think it's a real superpower of our organization is the purpose and the values. In the working at pace and at speed, one of our values is we do the right thing. And people take that very, very seriously. The work that we do has real meaning to patients, to patient lives. And I think people carry that sense of accountability at a very personal level and use that to inform the choices they make when we are faced at a crossroads in decisions. And then the purpose, I think our business supports patients with, oncology, cancer diseases, with heart disease, renal, cardiovascular problems, respiratory, immunology issues. We all know somebody in our circle of family, circle of friends that have suffered with one of those diseases. And I think it's that in itself keeps you very connected to the purpose of what we do. And that then drives the values in the way that we show up and the way that we engage it. And I think that, and that sense of accountability that we work in a very compliance-driven environment it is about smart risks, not reckless risks. And that's an important differentiator in the way that we think about innovation, the development that we support our leaders with in how they make choices, but how they devolve decision-making to their teams is also about ensuring that accountability continues.
And I think for an organization like AstraZeneca, that, that sort of turning purpose into performance is, I won't say easy, but there is a clear alignment there. You can create, I think, meaning and purpose and see a line of sight to business performance. But for organizations that just don't have that kind of purpose and mission, different organizations, like what would be your advice on, do you still go after purpose? Because you guys are it's such a part of your DNA. What would be your advice for organizations who just they don't have that to rally around in the same way?
Yeah, and I could see it, for different industries, it means different things. And I think you have to strike a balance of not making it too tenuous that it feels artificial.
Yeah.
But in that instance, I think it then becomes about what is the identity of the culture, what is it you want to be famous for?
Yeah.
What do you want to be famous for your customers? What do you want to be famous for as an employer? And what's the environment you want to cultivate? And I think in roles like mine, it's how do you help people perform at their best? We invest a huge amount of money, time and resources in recruiting the very best people in the market and attracting them. And, I'm sure every organization has the same aspiration. How do you then ensure that as they come into the organization, that you're then enabling them to grow within the organization, to tap into their untapped potential? And I genuinely believe that everybody has the potential to do something bigger and broader than wherever they are now, just with the right environment, the right exposure to learning, the right exposure to coaching and development. Then you get into the piece about how do you support the organization to have agility and leaders have agility to respond to the unknown? Because we're living in such a hyper-dynamic environment that agility organizationally and individually is going to be critically important for success. And then I think the last piece is about how do you create belonging? And belonging can mean different things. If your purpose is not as strong and part of your DNA like it is with our organization, then the belonging will come from a sense of feeling part of a team, having an identity as a team or an organization, and that comes back to your culture. And I think that's the levers that I would say that we need to continue investing in as HR professionals and as learning professionals.
Such great practical insights there. I think that, great advice about like, what do you want to be famous for? What do you want to be known for? It's something that people can feel great pride around. How do you create growth opportunities, development opportunities for people to keep them at the organization? And this idea, we've talked a lot about pace of change, future skills. This I think this concept of the skills half-life is really interesting. Like the rate at which skills are becoming redundant is just shrinking all of the time. What do you think is the role of, I suppose, that like adaptive mindset or learner mindset to ensure that you are always ready to adopt new skills, technology, AI, whatever it might be, when the time comes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, when I think about the shelf life of skills, and when I listen to peers in the technology industry, they talk about a shelf life of skills of 18 to 24 months.
Yeah.
And if you haven't reskilled in that time, you've lost relevance. I mean, you see how fast AI has replaced the need for coders in some instances. And yet coding used to be one of the hottest skills in the market. So I think in that regard, what it drives is, if you make learning your superpower, if you make learning agility the muscle that you invest in developing and continuing to grow, and in particular, if you think of it in micro learning, often people still reference learning as an event or some kind of program they've joined. But it's more about the 10, 20 minutes a day. It's more about the 15 minutes talking to somebody at the water cooler about something that you've not heard before, or being curious about the work they do. You are hearing new skills, new experiences, new perspectives, reflecting on them, practicing new ways of working, and consciously stepping into the area of discomfort of working in a way that you've not worked before, learning about something you've never learned before. But if you're practicing learning just as a skill set, you will maintain relevance on an ongoing basis. Because I genuinely believe that it doesn't matter which individual you speak to today. In 5 years' time, they will not be doing the same role. Even if the job title is the same, the job will not be done in the same way. The skills they need will have changed. The knowledge they need will have changed. The tools they use will have changed. So building a muscle of lifelong learning for me is that superpower that will maintain relevance. And the other factor that comes into that is it's a balance of knowing what to learn, but it's the balance of knowing what to unlearn. What is no longer serving you or being useful to you because technologies move forward, changes in perspectives, different understanding of a scenario or situations. All of these become an enabler to carrying the right level of knowledge and skills for what you need for the next phase in your journey, as opposed to trying to carry everything you've learned your entire life and feel that it's all still relevant. Some of it you need to put into storage and kind of go, that's no longer useful.
Yeah, that's such a kind of obvious but profound point, I think, in a way of just, what is the thing I need to leave behind and unlearn? We forget that, actually. And I really love your taking a note of it here. This, make learning your superpower. It's such a sort of inspiring note for us to almost come to the end on. So we've been talking, Mark, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about transforming for tomorrow, the skills needed, the role of leaders. Just to close us out, what would you say are 2 or 3 things that listeners should take away if they're really looking at how are we transforming as an organization? What are a couple of things that you would say, just this is start here?
I think one would be, and you referenced it earlier, we've made building coaching and feed forward skills and capabilities in line managers a key component of building our culture, because for me, coaching is the unlocking power for psychological safety. It enables inclusion safety. It enables learner safety. It enables people to contribute safely. And when people have those, it creates challenger safety. And when you get that speak up environment where people's ideas are heard, but also they have the resilience to understand that not every idea they put forward will get picked up. Not every idea is the right idea. Just because they've spoken up, that means they never speak up again. It's about creating that culture and that environment where there is healthy challenge. It's done respectfully. We pull in the voices of the quieter voices as well as the louder voices. And I think that the coaching capability becomes the unlock to that environment. And I think that just back to the basic question of coaching of ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
It just garners such a different response from people when you do invite participation as opposed to instruct. Now, as leaders, we still need to set direction, and there are things that we need to require, but it's balancing that with that coaching capability. I think the second piece for me is, and something that we're really thinking about within our organization for leaders, is how do you leverage adaptive leadership? What are the problems that leadership teams are uniquely positioned to define as a problem statement, to try and explore the unsolved, and to really think about how do you lean into creating disruption that moves you out of the comfort zone, that moves you out of the status quo into an environment of productive disruption that then frees up innovation, it frees up smart risk taking, and it allows you to experiment on the margins whilst also propelling you forward. And building that capability is something that we're really thinking about within the organization for our leaders, in how do you get above the current situation, look at what's happening on the periphery, read all the signals and the trends that are coming through. But then it's important that you get back onto the dance floor below you and kind of make smart decisions as to how you navigate, how you orchestrate, and how you take people with you. So I think if you combine coaching and building on a strengths-based perspective, and then you take an adaptive leadership and execute with real precision in your technical challenges, you can move the organization quite some yards down the line.
Beautifully put, Mark. You're such an engaging speaker, and I think you can cover so many topics and go from the profound to the really practical. And you've given us so much food for thought today. So thank you so much for being on EZRA Asks. It's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you to Marc Howells for such an engaging conversation. We covered so many great topics today. I'm sure you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and share, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of EZRA Asks. Bye for now.